Hey Falcons, I have another math lesson for you today, so let's dive right in. Okay, so today's math lesson is justifying fraction comparisons. That might seem like it's going to be a hard lesson, but I'm going to break it down so that you can do it step by step. But before we do that, let's look at our math message. It says, use fraction circles to solve this problem. Lucas eats 5/6 of a round quesadilla. Mura eats 7/8 of a round quesadilla. That is the same size. Who has the larger leftover piece of quesadilla? The important part to know is that it is the same size. It's not like our previous lesson where we talked about the pizza being a bigger size or possibly a smaller size. If I have one pizza that's a personal pan and one pizza that's a large pan, the fractions are not going to be equal because the size is different. But in this case, our quesadillas are the same size. Don't we just love putting food and fractions together? Let me show you how he did this one. If you remember, he did 5/6 of his quesadilla. So we are missing one spot. This is how much he ate. This is his leftover piece right here. Excellent. And this is Mura's. Mura ate 7/8 of her quesadilla. So her leftover piece is represented right here. Now the question is, who ate the bigger piece? If I stack them on top of each other, or whose leftover piece is the most, I see that Lucas' leftover piece is bigger than Mura's. So going back to our question, Lucas eats 5/6. Mura eats 7/8 of the same size of a quesadilla. Who has the bigger leftover piece? We saw that that was Lucas. Lesson, we're going to focus in on modeling equivalent fractions. All right, so it says name a fraction that is equivalent to 2/3. You may use your fraction tools to help you. 2/3 is equal to, well, we don't know yet. Show that number on the number line to make sure that it is true. Or you can do fraction strips and fraction circle pieces. We're going to do all three today. So first off, let's look at the number line that we have here. To find an equivalent to 2/3, we first have to make 2/3 on our number line. Do you remember the numerator is on top? That tells you how many pieces you have. And the bottom is your denominator, and that tells you how many pieces you have cut it on the number line between 0 and 1. So let's go ahead and cut it into 3 pieces according to our denominator. So we're going to go about here, and again about here. And we're going to do that on this line as well, because we want them to equal each other. Now the first line is done, except for I want to put a dot on our 2/3 mark, so I remember where I am going. So there's 0/3, 1/3, and 2/3. So I'm going to put my mark right here. And I'm going to make sure that my mark is going to land right here on my number line on my next one as well, because if they're equivalent, that means they're equal to each other. Now, my thought process is, if I take those thirds and I cut them in half, they're still going to be equal as long as I do the same amount. So I'm going to cut every section that I have in half. Now instead of thirds, I should have 6 equal sections. 0/6, 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, 6/6. Notice that these two here are equal, and I could go back and find what sixth it is. 0/6, 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6. So we could say 4/6 is equal to 2/3. And I'm going to write that in right here, 4/6. Numerator is 4, denominator is 6, telling me that I have 4 pieces of those 6 is equal to having 2 pieces of 3. As before, and this time we're using fraction strips. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in because if it's the same as before, we know that 2/3 is equal to 4/6. And let's show that on our number or our fraction strips here. Once again, we go through and we say 2/3 is about here. I have to cut this into 2 equal spots, yes, or 3 equal sections, sorry, because my denominator tells me to do so. And I'm going to do the same thing down here on this fraction strip. And then I simply just go through and I mark halfway in between each of those sections, trying to get them as even as possible. And we see 2/3 would be 1, 2, so right here. And we also see down here that this line matches up with that one. So we know that that would be equivalent or equal. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. So 2/3 is equal to 4/6, just the same as the last one. To do the same thing for our fraction circles. The first one we're going to divide into 3 equal sections. So we're going to put one line there, there, and there, making almost a peace sign. Doing the same over here. 3 equal sections. Remember, we have 2 of those 3 colored in. So I'm just going to do little scribbly lines showing that there's 2 of the 3. And then I come over here and I have 3, but I need to make it 6. How do we do that? Well, you guessed it, we go through and we cut each of those sections in half like we've been doing. Now you see there's 6 equal sections. And I could go back through and we said that, 2/3 is equal to 4/6, and we could show that again by coloring in 4 of those. Now, if I was doing this on paper, I'd want to color it in even better than that, but you could see that the sections here and here are equal to each other, as well as up here that are shaded are equal to each other. On this next section, we get to pick our own fractions to compare. So let's go ahead and pick a random fraction. Let's start with 1/4. 1/4. Okay, so I have 2 fraction circles here. This one represents the fourths. This one represents eighths. And I chose the eighths because if I cut the fourths in half like we did before, I would have 8 equal pieces. So I know that if 1/4 is covered, if I cut that in half, I would have 2/8. So 1/8 is, or 1/4 is equal to 2/8. Let's go ahead and write that down. We could do this on a number line as well. We take the first number and we divide it into 4 equal parts. So here's 0. There's the halfway mark. That's 2/4. There's our 4 equal sections, and we'll do it again over here. And then in this bottom one, we're going to make them eighths, so we have to cut those sections in half as well. Now we have 8 equal spots. And we see that 1/4, which is right here, comes down to this line here, which is 2 of the 8. Okay, and the next one we have to make this a true statement over here as well. Notice that it has the greater than sign. I know that that is greater than because we talk about the alligator being hungry and that wants to eat the most. So if it is pointing to the first fraction, we know that it's saying that that fraction is greater than another one. So in this one, we are not comparing equal, but we're looking for what is greater than each other. So in this one, I want to compare 1/4 to 2/5. 1/4 to 2/5. Let's start out with that number line again. And in the top one, we're doing fourths. So I'm going to put them into fourths. To make fourths, I take a number line, cut it in half, and then I cut those in half again. And I said 1/4, so we're going to look at this one right here. 1/4. The next number line, we're going to come down here and we're going to make it into 2/5. So we have to cut it into 5 equal spots. About here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 equal spots. All right. So we are looking for 2/5, which is right here. Looking at my number line, I can see that 2/5 is greater than 1/4. Let's look at one more way to do that. We're going to look at our fraction circles for that. This time we're looking at 1/4, which is my yellow. And then my light blue, which is fifths. And we're looking at 2 of those. So 2/5, 1/4, I could bring my pieces together. And I see that 1/4 is less than 2/5, so that makes 2/5 greater than 1/4, justifying my answer. Last part of our lesson, we're going to look at our home link, and it says to select the number sentence that represents the pictures below it. So we have to connect them together. So the first one says 1/2 is greater than 1/8. If I look on here, I would have to find which one has 1/2 compared to 1/8. And it is directly below it. The 1/2 and 1/8, these are fraction strips that they're showing. So I could click on it and click on this number here, and we could see that they. But our next one, number 2, has 2/3, and we're comparing that to 4/6. And as you see, that would go right here. The next one we have 3/8 compared to 3/6, so it would go here. And finally, we have 2/6 compared to 5/6, so that would go right there. And that does it for today's lesson. And as always, remember, you are smart, you are kind, you are important, and you are loved. Have a fabulous day, Falcons.